The committee is meeting today to receive testimony on the cyber initiative. The infiltration and exploitation of federal government networks and critical infrastructure networks is one of the most critical national security issues confronting our country today. Public reports suggest that federal networks have been under attack for years. These attacks have resulted in the loss of indeterminate amounts of information. The purpose of today's hearing is to discuss the administration's proposed cyber initiative, a proposal that attempts to reduce the vulnerability of our federal computer networks and critical infrastructure and the consequences of attacks against these networks. We aim to discuss several things today, including the consolidation of trusted Internet centers known as TICs, which would reduce the number of federal connections to the Internet and allow for easier monitoring of incoming and outgoing traffic. The implementation of the Department of Homeland Security's cyber monitoring capability throughout federal agencies, known as Einstein. The privacy implications of electronic data collection, efforts underway to conduct damage assessment of federal systems, and efforts to secure our federally and privately owned critical infrastructure from cyber attack. Thus far, I have been extremely disappointed in this administration's efforts in cybersecurity. The administration drafted a high-level national strategy for secure cyberspace in 2002 that presented problems and possible solutions to high-level cybersecurity issues, but never mandated any changes required to improve security. In 2003, the administration eliminated its top advisor on cybersecurity, Richard Clark, who was a key advisor to the president. Then, after Congress pushed for the creation of an assistant secretary for cybersecurity, DHS waited over a year to fill the position and buried it 4 levels down in the bureaucracy. Despite the creation of a cross-agency intelligence director, the administration failed to educate federal agency officials on the cyber threat. For instance, in a 2007 hearing before this committee, the Chief Information Officer at DHS, Scott Sharbo, who's with us today, told us that he had never received any intelligence reports about nation-state hacking and that he was unfamiliar with this activity. To me, this suggests a failure on the part of the Director of National Intelligence, who is charged with connecting dots that would prevent cross-agency intelligence failures from occurring. This administration regularly requested inadequate budgets for DHS cybersecurity activities, both for the National Cybersecurity Division, the U.S. CERT, and the CIO security budgets, and the R&D activities undertaken at the Science and Technology Directorate. And this administration has vested responsibility for securing these networks in folks who don't understand the threat or the technical methods to deal with the threat. Secretary Chertoff's decision to promote Mr. Sharbo to the position of Deputy Undersecretary for National Protection and Program places him in charge of DHS's efforts in the cyber initiative. This decision was made in spite of the committee's investigation into how he and his staff failed both to protect the department's computers from intrusion and properly manage the contractor in charge of security. In light of these and other issues, it's hard to believe that this administration now believes it has the answers to secure our federal networks and critical infrastructure. I want to be clear. I believe that cybersecurity is a serious problem, maybe the most complicated national security issue in terms of threat and jurisdiction. This problem will be with us for decades to come. I'm pleased that this administration recognizes the challenges we face in securing this area. As chairman of this committee, I continue to have numerous practical and theoretical questions about the initiative and the possibilities of its success. Who is in charge? What are the metrics for success? Who is accountable? How are privacy concerns being addressed? How will future technologies be incorporated? How will future threats be addressed? What legal frameworks must be amended? How will administration work with the private sector? And what will be done with critical infrastructure? I'm committed to charting a course toward freedom from fear, and I look forward to working through these difficult questions in the weeks, months, and years to come. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee, and who's standing in for the ranking member of the full committee, gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, for an opening statement.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing is on the administration's cybersecurity initiative, which is a sweeping effort to better secure the computer networks owned and operated by the federal government. In my judgment, since 9/11, we've been very focused on the threats from the physical world, yet not enough attention, in my view, has been paid on threats in the virtual world. I'm glad to see that the administration has come forward with an initiative, a plan. Congressman Langevin and I have launched a nonpartisan commission to study the threat of cybersecurity to this nation and to provide recommendations to the next President of the United States. And I look forward to seeing their recommendations as well. As this committee learned last year, the government's computer networks are under constant attack from hackers and criminals, many of whom are sponsored by foreign nations. And just last year, the country of Estonia was temporarily taken off the internet by organized hackers. While the chances that a similar attack could achieve similar results in this country are small, the threat remains very real. The Department of Homeland Security will play a prominent role in developing and implementing the administration's initiative. In fact, the President's fiscal year 2009 budget request includes close to $200 million more for DHS than was requested last year for cybersecurity, and I'm pleased to see that. In addition, media reports indicate the administration plans to ask for up to $30 billion over the next 5 years. If this figure is accurate, Congress needs to know how that money will be spent. This project is still in the formative stages. Therefore, I understand a number of details cannot be shared at this time or possibly in an open forum. But it is important, however, that the administration keep Congress informed so as to avoid any misunderstanding about what this initiative is designed to do. With such a large project that cuts across the government, efficient congressional oversight may be difficult to achieve because so many different committees claim jurisdiction over DHS. It is times like this that highlight the fact that despite promises to fulfill all the remaining 9/11 Commission's recommendations, the Congress still has not consolidated oversight of DHS, and unfortunately is now has oversight by 86 committees and subcommittees. I understand the administration doesn't believe that further authorities are necessary for this initiative, but this area potentially could be added to our annual DHS authorization bill, which I urge the chairman and this committee to take up prior to congressional action on DHS appropriations bill later this spring. I raised this issue during our full committee hearing this past Tuesday and was pleased to hear an optimistic response from Chairwoman Sanchez. We on the Republican side look forward to working with our majority counterparts and colleagues on another bipartisan DHS authorization bill, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Other members of the committee are reminded that under committee rules, opening statements may be submitted for the record. I now welcome our witnesses to this hearing. Our first witness, Karen Evans, is the Administrator of the Office of Electronic Government and Information Technology at the Office of Management and Budget. In this role, she oversees implementation of IT throughout the federal government, including advising the Director on the performance of IT investments, overseeing the development of enterprise architecture within the agencies, directing the activities of the Chief Information Officer Council, and overseeing the usage of the e-government fund in support to support interagency partnership and innovation. Our second witness is Robert Jameson, the Undersecretary for the National Protection and Program Directorate at the Department of Homeland Security. He was confirmed in December 2007 under Secretary Jameson's lead leads the department's integrated effort to analyze, manage, and reduce risks. Mr. Jameson oversees the department's efforts in the cyber initiative. He will be joined in questioning period by Deputy Undersecretary for National Protection and Programs Directorate, Scott Scarborough. Mr. Scarborough was named to this position earlier this month after previously serving as the department's Chief Information Officer. Without objection, the witness's full statement will be read into the record. I ask each witness to summarize their statements, beginning with Mr. Evans for 5 minutes. Ms. Evans.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to discuss the administration's comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. Our work on the Cyber Initiative is focused on building upon our existing efforts to continue to close the gaps in areas of continued weakness, implementing existing security policies, and managing our risk associated, in particular, with non-secure external connections, including Internet points of presence. Please note our work is happening concurrently on all of the programs described in my written statement. Agencies connect to the Internet to deliver timely information and services to the public, but each new connection multiplies threats and vulnerabilities. Agencies can consolidate or reduce unnecessary connections while still accomplishing program goals. OMB has set a target date of completion for the reduction and optimization of agencies' external connections, including those to the Internet, by June of 2008. Agencies reduce the number of Internet connections as they also will be determining transition, and if so, their transition strategy to the networks contract managed by the General Services Administration. This transition provides an opportunity for agencies to consolidate and optimize their external access points and to obtain secure telecommunications technologies and services. In connection with the network's transition, Einstein will be deployed at the appropriate external connections. Currently, 14 departments and agencies have deployed Einstein. Einstein will be discussed more in depth by my colleague, Undersecretary Jameson, during his statement. Agencies are also taking advantage of products and services offered by the Information Systems Security line of business. This initiative, led by the Department of Homeland Security and OMB, was introduced in the spring of 2005 and identified common solutions for 4 areas to be shared by the government: security training, Federal Information Security Management Act, FISMA, reporting, situational awareness and incident response, and the selection, evaluation, and implementation of security solutions. As of November 2007, 12 agencies have implemented security awareness training services provided by 3 approved shared service centers, and 13 agencies have begun using FISMA reporting services provided by 2 approved shared service centers. As a result, agencies are beginning to reduce duplicative investment in common security tools, ensuring a baseline level of training and reporting performance, and are better able to refocus their efforts to other complex and critical security issues at their agency. With the understanding vulnerabilities result from weaknesses in technology, as well as improper implementation and oversight of technological products, we have collaborated with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, and Microsoft to develop a set of information security controls to be implemented on all federal desktops, which are running Microsoft Windows XP or Vista. This set of controls, known as the Federal Desktop Core Configuration, is currently being implemented across the federal enterprise. By implementing a common configuration, we are gaining better control of our federal systems and are allowing for closer monitoring and correction of potential vulnerabilities while limiting the download of Internet applications to only authorized professionals. In addition to the desktop configuration, we are also working with the vendor community to make our applications safer. As part of this program, NIST has developed testing tools for use by both the federal agencies and the vendors. NIST awarded Security Content Automation Protocol, or SCAP, validation to 3 products as of February 4, 2008. 3 independent laboratories have been accredited by NIST's National Voluntary Laboratory Accreditation Program for the SCAP product validation. To help agency procurement officers ensure new acquisitions include the common security configurations, We have also provided agencies with recommended procurement language. The Federal Acquisition Council has approved the language and is completing the process of adding this language to the Federal Acquisition regulations. While notable progress in resolving IT security weaknesses has been made, and I have included more examples in my written statements, problems remain in agencies' implementation, and new threats and vulnerabilities continue to materialize. Work remains to continue to improve the security of information and systems supporting the federal government's missions and manage the risk associated with these systems. To address these challenges, OMB looks forward to continuing to work with the agencies, GAO, and Congress to promote the appropriate risk-based and cost-effective IT security programs, policies, and procedures. I will be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. The Chair now recognizes Mr. Jameson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Thompson, Congressman Call, and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to update you on the Department of Homeland Security's efforts to improve America's cybersecurity posture. I also appreciate the committee's interest in the cyber initiative. The Department and our interagency partners are committed to an ongoing engagement with Congress in an appropriate setting on the classified aspects of our activities. In my role as Undersecretary for the National Protection and Programs Directorate, one of my most important programmatic activities has been cybersecurity, and I have served as a lead DHS official for the Cyber Initiative since last summer. I'm pleased this morning to be joined on this panel by my esteemed colleagues from OMB, Karen Evans, and the former DHS Chief Information Officer and just recently appointed Deputy Undersecretary Scott Sharbo. Secretary Chertoff identified cybersecurity as one of the Department's top priorities for 2008, and the President's 2008 and 2009 budgets reflect this priority. We are aware of and have defended against malicious cyber activity directed at the U.S. government. We take these threats seriously and remain really concerned that this activity is growing more sophisticated, more targeted, and more prevalent. The nature of the threat is diverse, ranging from unsophisticated hackers to very technically competent adversaries using state-of-the-art intrusion techniques. Many of these malicious attacks are designed to steal information and to disrupt, deny access to, degrade, or destroy critical federal information systems. Over the past 4 months, the Department has provided this committee with several classified briefings on a number of different cyber-related topics, including threat. The Department and our interagency partners remain committed to an ongoing dialogue with Congress in an appropriate setting on these classified topics. DHS has the lead responsibility for assuring the security, resiliency, and reliability of the nation's information technology and communications infrastructure. Since 2003, the Department has been investing in the development of a nimble, effective cyber emergency response capability and a culture of preparedness. These activities have positioned DHS to play a key role in this important initiative we will discuss today. We've established a National Cybersecurity Division to focus on securing cyberspace. In NCSD, we've built a 24/7 watch, warning, and response operations centers to defend against and respond to cyber attacks, the U.S. CERT. U.S. CERT has developed and deployed an Einstein program which provides government officials with situational awareness about malicious activity across the federal civilian network so we can protect against and respond to cyber threats more effectively. Under the National Infrastructure Protection Plan framework, we have also worked closely with our private sector partners to develop 17 sector-specific plans which all include a cybersecurity component. We're here today because we must do more. The federal government has a vast information interstate system with thousands of points of access. At last count, the federal network had at least 4,000 access points. Defending the federal system in its current configuration is a significant challenge. Implementing effective defensive strategies requires a manageable number of access points. Therefore, we are working with OMB to reduce the number of access points. As we reduce the number of access points, we plan to employ an enhanced intrusion detection capability, enhanced Einstein. While valuable, currently our Einstein capability is limited. We do not have comprehensive coverage, and it is a delayed flow analysis tool. We need to enhance the capability through comprehensive coverage across our federal system external access points and upgrade Einstein to detect malicious activity in real time. Our goal is a comprehensive, consistent intrusion detection capability that is informed by our full understanding of the threat. Mr. Chairman, the threat is real. To defend our networks, a comprehensive situational awareness capability must augment the foundation already in place at the Department. We will achieve this improved situational awareness by consolidating our federal connections, enhancing our intrusion detection capabilities, improving our threat assessment and information sharing capabilities, and building a stronger watch and warning system. These changes, coupled with an investment in our people, processes, and systems, will enable the federal government to apply the full capabilities of the U.S. government to the defense of our networks. Thank you for the opportunity to update you today on DHS's efforts to improve America's cybersecurity posture, and I welcome the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thank the witnesses for their testimony. I now remind each member that he or she will have 5 minutes to question the panel. I now recognize myself for the first set of questions. Mr. Charbot, we had a hearing in June of last year where Mr. Langevin chaired the subcommittee, and it was quite revealing that a number of attacks had occurred on our system, and perhaps we were not as notified, or you and your department, of many of those attacks until a contractor informed you of that. And the infamous you don't know what you don't know comment was in response. Now, to the extent possible, since that hearing, can you give this committee the follow-up as to what you have instituted in your previous position and this present position to prevent such attacks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At that hearing, we were asked about some of the security notifications that we've had on our networks through our intrusion detection systems. In 2005, we looked at the current contract that we had on those local networks. We identified gaps, and we put dollars in place to fill a lot of those gaps, including putting contract support in place for that. We also identified a need to recompete that contract, which we have done. It is true that at the time of that hearing, I had not been read into any of the specific threat vectors that are in place and that we are now aware of. The first briefing that we did have was with OMB. That was to the General CIO Council. And since that, we've had follow-up briefings. This initiative has caused a number of briefings, and my staff and I have also gone out and pretty aggressively looked towards any sources we can to identify briefings that get beyond a sensitive but unclass or even a secret level. At the time, we said we're only focused on the data. That's all we can look at in terms of data of intrusion sets, et cetera, to identify anything back to whether it's a nation-state attack or what is the nature of the vulnerability. We are still in that phase. There's a handful of issues that we are continuing to look at. Those are in a classified state. We take every security piece incident very serious at the operation. We've instituted at the Department of Department of Homeland Security. We've instituted several issues since I've started at that department. The one we spoke about many times is OneNet. We've said very publicly that is the most important IT project that we can put in place at the department. That's a consolidation of our wide area points of access. It mirrors very closely to what the TIC effort is about. We want to put state-of-the-art intrusion detection at those access points. That includes Einstein and other services. We've put that in place. We've put a security operations center in place that's 24/7. We're beginning to peer to those from our different components at the department. We've raised the classifications of the CIOs, of our security administrators, of our network administrators, of our deputy CIOs, so that no longer are they just getting an unclassified brief. Quite honestly, what you get in that state is just a piece of information that's very difficult to interpret back to any attribution at all, or to identify what the gaps are. What makes it even more difficult at the Department of Homeland Security is we are an immigration agency, which we have clients from outside of this country who are trying to receive information on our public points of access, as well as law enforcement points, as well as border and port agencies. So we've done a number of things before the hearing, since the hearing, in order to shore up our security operations at the department, including doing a number of recompetitions and rebuilds of certain applications of moving it to our points of access, which were a part of the OneNet project.
Thank you. We'll come back to some other questions. I yield to the ranking member for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to follow up on the chairman's line of questioning, because at the last hearing you did, when you testified, it did raise some serious concerns. You're the CIO for the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. There is a major threat of intrusion into our federal networks, and yet you're not read into, as you said, read into the threat factors at the time. And I understand you didn't know what you didn't know, but who was responsible for ensuring that you had that information that didn't get you that information that you should have had? We talk a lot after 9/11 about, silos and not connecting the dots, not sharing information, and yet we have what I consider to see a major breach at the federal level of not sharing information that should have been shared with you. I mean, you were the CIO of Homeland Security, and you didn't have this threat factor information. Can you tell me what happened? And then I think you've explained what you've done to correct that. That's the good news. You had a clearance, I assume, at the time, but you said you've upgraded now all the CIOs to have the clearance to share that information. Just what happened back then?
It's difficult to tell what happened, sir. The briefings that we get are on a compartmentalized basis. There are tear lines between information moving down from classifications level. Most of the information that we got prior was at an unclassified level. At that point, it's very difficult to interpret that. If I can bring this back to the hearing points in terms of the enterprise network, I think this is an issue that's going to have to be addressed across a lot of the components of raising classification levels, moving information onto secured networks, and not trying to do this on our unclassed networks. And that's going to be a training, a clearance issue, a network issue. We've addressed that. Once we do have the information at the Homeland, I think we've moved very aggressively in terms of raising the visibility with our key points. We've taken that to mean our CIOs within the department, our security officers within the department, our network administrators. We can bring people together in classified settings, action those, and then task those on an unclassified point of presence. All I can say is prior to that, there were gaps in that.
And I think you suffered from that gap, obviously. And I think as we move forward with this initiative, and as Congress provides its oversight into how best to implement this initiative, that's got to be one of the key factors to make sure the CIOs for each of the major federal agencies involved with this initiative are certainly read into the classification level to share that kind of threat information. I mean, we've gotten the reports that the federal government has said massive intrusions into its federal networks, and it seems to me the CIOs of these agencies should be aware of that fact to better protect itself. So, and I know this is part of the initiative, but I would encourage you to make this a priority in this initiative, and we will be, looking at that issue. Mr. Jameson, did you have a comment?
Yes, sir. Congressman, you're exactly on point. This is one of the fundamental challenges that we're facing, and a lot of the threat information was extremely classified. And what we're talking about trying to do is get comprehensive situational awareness. So as we improve our Einstein deployment, improve intrusion detection, we're also coordinating with our intelligence components and all of the federal government agencies that have threat information, so we can get more real-time information to the CIOs and to the network operations centers and security operations centers so that they can take a defensive action, and that's the top priority.
Okay. And my second question is, under this initiative, I think, I'm a believer in clear lines of authority. When you have these mergers and partnerships and sharing agreements and whatnot, you need to know who's in charge and who's in charge of the budget. Under this initiative, can you tell me, maybe Mr. Jameson, who's in charge here?
Sure. First, let me caveat the statement by I'd be happy to give you a detailed briefing on the full budget, including the classified parts in a closed session. For what we're talking about today, for the TIC consolidation. We share the lead with OMB on helping them consolidate the internet access points, but we have the lead to deploy the intrusion detection, to own, operate, and manage the intrusion detection and come up with that comprehensive situational awareness picture. There are many more parts of this initiative that I can't discuss openly in this forum, and would be happy to give you a classified briefing on that.
And I understand that. I think one of the hearings that Chairman of the Subcommittee, Langevin, and I had, we had testimony that the DHS was not really coordinating certainly as well as we would hope with the Department of Defense, and I know that may be getting into a classified area. I hope that has that's an area that will be focused on as well. They certainly have great expertise in this area that I think the DHS would be of great value to you in terms of the coordination. So I certainly hope that takes place. And lastly, we heard about the declassified Operation Aurora, where the Idaho National Labs found a vulnerability where a power grid could be shut down, exploded with the click of a mouse. That caused obviously shock waves, I think, through not only in the federal government but also here the administration and the Congress in terms of the vulnerability. That's great work, though, in terms of detecting that vulnerability and fixing it. Can I hear from you maybe some of the lessons learned from this project and what you're doing to protect the United States?
Sure. I think it was a success story. I think, as always, when you look back, there's always room for improvement. But what happened with the Aurora vulnerability is research that was funded by the Department of Homeland Security at through our lab networks identified the vulnerability. Once we identified the vulnerability, we worked through the National Infrastructure Protection process and our interagency partners to validate that there was a vulnerability and actually develop mitigation plans. And we developed those mitigation plans and tested those mitigation plans and actually came up with the dissemination plan within that NIP framework, leveraging both our interagency partners and the federal government and our private sector partners, and drove those implementation plans. We continue to monitor the implementation plans. We're pleased with the results. What we must continue to do is make sure that we are able to validate that those measures are still being taken in the field, and we continue to pursue enhanced cybersecurity. But I do think it was a success story, especially given the fact that the sensitivity of the information and the challenges with trying to get implementation measures down to the field while you don't highlight a vulnerability, and I think the system worked.
And I agree with that, and I look forward to hearing more about it. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I now recognize the gentleman from Rhode Island, Chairman of the Subcommittee, for 5 minutes, Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you yielding, and I appreciate the witnesses for their testimony. I have deep appreciation for the chairman's line of questions, as well as the ranking member about who knew what when, and this issue of silos, and obviously the Department of Homeland Security, being the lead agency for security, needs to know what threats we're facing and making sure that the dots are connected. And I haven't been satisfied previously that had been happening. I hope that is changing, and we heard some of that in your testimony today. I'm not going to go on about that, but I will say, obviously, for years now, our federal networks have been under attack, and I believe that the infiltration and exploitation of these networks is one of the most critical issues confronting our nation. The acquisition of our government's information by outsiders undermines our strength as a nation, and if sensitive information clearly is stolen and absorbed, our systems are hacked by our adversaries, clearly we are strategically harmed. And I don't believe that this administration, at least up until now, has made cybersecurity the priority that it should be. I see that is, I believe, is starting to change, and with the right vision and leadership, I believe we can improve security of our federal networks and our critical infrastructure, and there are some promising elements of the cybersecurity initiative, but there are still some gaping holes, and I just want to assure the American people that under Chairman Thompson's leadership and the work that we're doing on our subcommittee, that we're going to continue to perform robust oversight of this issue. In terms of questions, in terms of what I see as gaps, what I want to know is how many and what kinds of connections does the trusted internet connection cover? For instance, does the TIC cover government to contractor network connections? Because we know that it's not only about securing our networks, but unauthorized intrusions. We need to secure about that. We had problems right with the Department of Homeland Security. We had contractors plugging unauthorized laptops into our own network, which you have viruses on there. They infiltrate our network. So you could be securing your networks, but if you have unauthorized access, that's a problem. So does it cover, and also does it cover federal to state and local connections? What about public service e-gov websites, such as student loans and at the Department of Education or Social Security or IRS e-file sites? How about law enforcement interconnections, internet connections used for investigative purposes? So I'd like you to answer that, and as well as what will the cyber initiative do to secure federally owned or privately owned critical infrastructure, such as nuclear power plants and the electric grid from cyber attack? As part of the TIC consolidation, will you consolidate connections between federally owned critical infrastructure and the internet? In other words, will dams operated by the Bureau of Reclamation or power plants operated by the TVA consolidate their connections, and will you install Einstein on these connections?
I'd be happy to answer the first part of the question, which is what types of connections, and the way that we're approaching it is it's all external connections. As you clearly outlined, any external connection to an entity causes or poses a risk. So all agencies were required to report back to DHS by the guidance of OMB to tell how many external connections, and that's all of them, whether it's going to a federal contractor, whether it's your internet point of presence, whether it's a direct connect between you and another. If it's external to your operation, it counts, and it's being looked at as part of this effort, because we need to manage the risk associated with those, because this is a shared responsibility of managing the risk by department to by department. They all have to look at what type of information they have, what type of services they're providing, and then manage the risk accordingly to that. So they have all reported in. We gave them a reporting template. We have the number baseline of connections that they have right now, so that we can then move to optimize those going forward.
And the second part of the question?
I'll just follow up on the critical infrastructure. As Karen mentioned, we are focused on all external connections and getting those external points solidified. The initial focus of the effort is to get the .gov networks under stronger intrusion detection management and situational awareness. We're continuing our dialogue through the NIP process on critical infrastructure and how we better manage cybersecurity in those areas. We'll continue to engage with them and develop a stronger plan, and some of those initiatives we'll be happy to talk in more detail about in the classified session.
Thank you. Well, that's promising. We're going to continue to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman. If with your indulgence, I do have one last question. Have we ever done a full damage assessment of federal agency networks or DHS networks? If not, why not? And will this be covered under the cyber initiative?
Not to my knowledge has a full damage assessment been done, but I will say that we investigate known intrusions and make sure that each agency follows up and has their responsibility, and Karen may want to go in more detail about that. U.S. CERT has played a support role in investigating intrusion activity and making sure that we follow up on damage assessment from known intrusions. There is a broader effort to do a more detailed risk assessment as we move forward with this initiative on the total risk picture for the federal government as we address those risks. And Karen, you may want to follow up on that.
So I'd like to clarify a couple pieces here. One, under the FISMA, Federal Information Security Management Act, agencies do need to do an assessment right off the bat on all their systems. And the guidance has been given out to the agencies, and we report on this on an annual basis. So all systems are categorized by high, medium, and low risk. And we report on that, and then they all have to do testing, have security controls in place, and then also then evaluate what that is. And so we report on that on an annual basis. That report is due March the 1st every year.
Yeah, if I could just stop you there, because that's a risk assessment. That's different than a damage assessment.
But I'm going to get there.
Okay.
So the second part of that is, as a result of the loss of data that happened at the VA situation with the privacy, the personal identifiable information. We put additional procedures in place so that as agencies have things happen, and we also now have a BPA available for all agencies so that they can then do an assessment after the fact, so that they can then go in and see how much damage has actually occurred, what they are supposed to do. The policy is in place. They have teams that are in place at the highest levels of each department so that as they lose data, they are supposed to assess it, what is the risk associated with that, and then take proper precautions and proper notification associated with it.
Okay, but that's prospectively, but you're saying that we have not and we are not going to do a damage assessment?
No, sir, they
What
need
is
to do a damage assessment each time that's how the policy is set up now. And so they do an assessment as each incident occurs and as they report the incidents in. So they report incidents into U.S. CERT. They have to make an assessment at that point, depending on the type of incident by the categories we have. Then they have to continue on doing the assessment. You're calling it a damage assessment. We call it, a risk, data breach type of assessment so that they can then take the appropriate actions. That's whether you turn it over to law enforcement, whether you have to notify individuals for the services that you've done if their information may have been compromised, or notify your partners so that they are aware of what has happened within your entity to be able to share it for more awareness across the board. So we have enhanced our procedures to make sure that that is being done on a consistent basis.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Dent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to Mr. Jamison. Mr. Jamison, I guess my first question is, who is in charge of this cyber initiative, and who's going to hold the budget authority for it?
Congressman, for the portions that we're talking about today, for the TIC consolidation, we share the lead with OMB. But the $115 million budget supplemental that addresses this issue of deploying Einstein and dramatically ramping up our comprehensive situational awareness, DHS has the budget authority for that, and are owning, operating, and managing that equipment. We'll be happy to go into more details and follow-up briefings on the rest of the classified budget and who has the leads for the other pieces.
I guess in a follow-up to that question, if the initiative is spread across the entire government, who is going to have the ultimate control over how everybody is to work together? Obviously, Mr. McCall pointed out some gaps and people not knowing things that they needed to know, apparently. So who's going to have that ultimate control to make sure that people are actually working together on this?
Let me answer the question in a couple of ways. There is the Director of National Intelligence has a coordination role for all aspects of the initiative to help coordinate the project management of those initiatives. Each individual agency that has authorities and responsibilities under the initiative have that responsibility. Would be happy to come back in a classified session and give you a lot more details on that aspect. Department of Homeland Security plays a key role in the protection of the .gov and federal networks from an Einstein perspective and has a key lead role in that. We also have a coordination role across the cybersecurity domain. We would be happy as that develops, the plan for that develops, to come back up in a classified session and lay out in detail how that coordination role is going to be played out to coordinate all of the activities across the federal government.
And it's also, thank you for that answer. It's also my understanding that U.S. CERT is going to be able to view the content of communications over government networks. And I guess the question is, why is this important, and what information will they be collecting, and what will they do with it?
First of all, if you may, I brought a couple of props with me. If I can ask one of my employees to come up, I'd like to kind of explain to you what the differences are. If you got the other two first, I want to show this.
Yeah, we can't see that, by the way. Well, maybe some of you can.
Can you take it up to the Congress? Currently, our current Einstein capability is a flow analysis tool. So if you look at the current Einstein flow records, this is the basic information that Einstein captures: IP addresses, the size of data packets, and where information is flowing from network to network. We capture that, and then once a day, or routinely we download it, and the other chart shows you the types of analysis that we do on that information. So we're trying to detect patterns, we're trying to detect malicious IP addresses, and to do analysis that looks at activity that would look suspicious or have malicious intent. It's delayed, and it's at the our effectiveness. We've got good analysts, but our effectiveness is limited to how good our analysts are. Where we want to go is we want to be able to detect the malicious code that we know about when a adversary or an intrusion has a signature of malicious code. We want the sensors to be able to scan for that malicious code and alert us when we know that we have malicious activity. Let me point out that this is no different than intrusion detection capabilities that are on federal systems today. They all have commercial capability to do intrusion detection. What is different is we're going to have comprehensive coverage of our external points and make sure that we've got intrusion detection at all those points. We're also going to make sure it's consistent, so the same intrusion detection is consistent, and it's going to be informed by the knowledge of the federal government of what we know about the threat. So we'll have the latest signature information on the threat comprehensively across the federal government. So it addresses some of the concerns that I've heard from the committee today about not knowing all the threat avenues and one agency knowing more threat information than another. This is the intent, to get the comprehensive situational awareness.
Thank you. And, real quickly, the specific role of U.S. CERT, the administration is requesting, I guess, about $100 million more than was enacted last year. And so I guess the question is, how are you going to spend this U.S. CERT money?
It really breaks down into a couple of different components. The majority of it is in deploying the equipment, so the intrusion detection equipment to the sites. We also have a large chunk of money, about $43 million for the 08 budget in facilities as we ramp up our capabilities to add more people. We have to build the back-end analytical capabilities, so just as I've shown you some of the analysis has to be done on flow records, we need to build up our capability to do analysis on that to handle a much larger percentage of the traffic. Currently, our Einstein capability handles a very, very, very small percentage of the federal government traffic. We want to expand that to 100% through this initiative, so we have to back up our analytical capability. And it also will allow us to build our malicious malware analysis labs and those things and expand them to handle the additional volume. Those are the major components.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. We now recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Harmon, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. As I think the witnesses know, members of this committee have received a number of classified briefings on the threat. Obviously, we're not discussing the threat here, but since my focus over all my years in Congress, all 100 years that I've served in Congress, has been on security threats, I take that kind of information very seriously, and I think the threats are substantial, starting with hackers, but going on to much bigger threats. I have been sitting here with my mouth open. I think that this hearing reminds me of FEMA trailers. You know, the government doing something and 2 years later deciding that it's toxic and taking it away. I think while all of you are well-meaning and working hard at your jobs, the fact that you don't have the threat information and that you are working on projects that will take years to complete is absolutely shocking. Let me repeat that. I think it is shocking. If we're serious about these threats, and I am serious about these threats, we're not being serious about our response to the threats. It is not timely. I don't get any sense of urgency. I don't think much of it will work. As an example, as we all know, most of the cyber network is in the private sector. I think absolutely everybody knows that. You have been talking about private sector collaboration and cooperation. My understanding is the private sector considers Einstein too passive, and it doesn't deliver information in real time. So how is it that we are going to, in real time, have a response to a very significant threat? I just don't see it happening. I don't see DHS being able to do it within DHS, let alone coordinate our response across our government. So I'm sitting here really concerned about that. Secondly, I hear from constituents all the time in my district. They're really aware of programs that involve having access to personal information of American citizens. And obviously, for this program to work, as you have been discussing, there has to be some collaboration with some of our security agencies, like NSA and DOD. I have no doubt that you're working on, and that we have been briefed on, some legal protocols about all that, and that there is an effort to protect privacy. However, I assure you that constituents of mine listening to this hearing, and I'm sure they're all tuned in, even though it's pretty early in California, are thinking about this as government sets up new spy network. That is how they're going to receive this information. So let me ask you to respond, to all of you, to what I've just said. Two parts. Number one, is this in real time and fast enough to mount a serious response to a serious threat? And number two, what would you advise me to tell my constituents who are going to call in this afternoon and ask me how I'm going to stop this latest government spy network into their personal privacy?
Thank you, Congressman. I'll address those. The previous charts I put up was trying to get exactly to that point. Obviously, could do a better job explaining it. But I would say that right now our Einstein capability is passive. We're looking at flow records. We're not looking for malicious activity. We're doing it after the fact. And we want to move that to real-time intrusion detection capability. So we want to make sure we lock down our nodes of access to the federal government and give ourselves real-time malicious activity intrusion detection. So that's exactly the intent of this. We're aggressive about it. We're going to be employing, as we ramp down the number of locations, we're going to be deploying that equipment this year. And as you can tell by our budget request, we've ramped up our capabilities to respond to that. Secondly, on the privacy issue, I can tell you one thing. First of all, privacy and civil rights has been a top priority for this. We've had our privacy folks and our civil rights folks involved in this from the very start. Current Einstein has a privacy impact assessment that's public. We're currently in the process of doing a privacy impact assessment for the new capability as we move it forward, as well as full legal review, and we take that matter very seriously. But I would like to add that it's the capability that we're talking about is for detecting that malicious activity in real time is no different than the commercial activity or commercial intrusion detection capabilities that many agencies and every corporation in America has on their systems. The issue is it's going to be comprehensive, it's going to be consistent, it's going to be informed by our threat information.
It's going to be massive, and it's going to be across the government and possibly across the private sector. So it's a little bigger than any of the other networks or tools that individual companies have, right?
We're not talking about the private sector right now. We're talking about the federal government nodes
Well,
and traffic coming into the federal government.
Got it. Other people have any answers to my two questions?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to answer those questions as well. And everything that we were talking about, and even on the threat information and the vulnerabilities that we're all aware of, this all starts with a defense in depth. There is no silver bullet. We all know that. And so there are several things that the agencies are doing. First and foremost, most of these things come from exploiting known vulnerabilities and through configuration management. There is the very extensive effort, and I mentioned this in my testimony, and we did this jointly with the NSA, which is set up the way that the FISMA was intended, where they would do standards in an open setting, and then we would go through the process that the Commerce Department has. So we have set up 700 settings that then reduce the vulnerability and then make sure that what we're doing is building that in right up front. So some of these things that are common sense, that we're going ahead and trying to take care of that on a mass basis, and that's also then going to be built into the computers that get delivered to the agency. So in spite of themselves, they will be successful because they will be coming configured securely. That's the first thing that we're doing, because those things, we should take those right off the table, and that should not be an issue. The other thing that the agencies are doing are also encrypting all their data at rest, data that's mobile, so that should that happen, that then it becomes harder, so you're raising the threshold up. And then we're also then using two-factor authentication, which then makes sure that people who are authorized, you know that those are the people who are supposed to be on your networks. So we have these in place. The agencies are rolling out, they have these measures, they are implementing these, and they are upgrading their security as they go forward. As part of privacy and security, that is an administration concern, has always been. It's a high priority, and we have been doing all of these activities in a very transparent way so that everyone can comment on what we're doing. The privacy impact assessments are out there. We put it through the Federal Register notice process so that everyone, it's done in a very transparent way to make sure that the citizens know how we intend to protect that information.
Did you want to comment? If he could just finish his response, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I would just add that the Einstein program is only a part of the total cyber effort. We're really focused on also changing the way networks are operated. And that's down at the operator level in terms of just their situational awareness, their training, and how they react and respond on a daily basis to operations, as well as how we procure, how we also configure the different things which Ms. Evans just went into.
Thank you. Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to just go a little further with a question that Mr. Dent asked y'all, and Secretary Jameson, it's my understanding that y'all can view the content of all the .gov connections, and I'm concerned about privacy too, as Congresswoman Harman is. We've had your folks from civil rights as well as the privacy protection of DHS come testify before this committee, and the question I have, or frustration I have, is I don't really see beyond just the DHS how my folks in my district whose privacy is really going to be protected. It looks almost like the fox guarding the hen house, proverbially. As a United States Marine, I'm very concerned about the security of this nation. And as a original intent constitutionalist, I believe that national security and what you guys are doing is the prime purpose of the United States government. But I'm not convinced, as I think Ms. Harmon's not convinced, that privacy is going to be protected in the process of developing these cyber protections within the government connections. I encourage you to try to find something beyond Einstein that is going to be focusing on the bad guys and not focusing just on the general public, but finding some way to protect the privacy of American citizens, the good guys. And as I see DHS developing its policies, when I go through security at airports or all these other things, it just looks to me as if we're focusing more of our resources, which are very limited, more of our personnel, greater and greater bureaucracy on focusing upon all us good guys and not on the bad guys. Can you assure me or tell me how y'all maybe can go to Einstein 2.0, whatever the system is, that's going to protect the privacy rights of American citizens, the good guys, and make sure that we don't have these security threats within the cyberspace of the .gov connections?
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, let me say that this is a comprehensive initiative, and there are a lot of agencies involved, and it has a comprehensive plan, and we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to brief that to you in full in a classified session. From the standpoint of privacy, it is a top concern. We're currently not looking at content, as you put it. That's where we need to go.
Not looking at any content?
Not currently. We're proposing that we're going to do that.
Well, that's
we're going
my
through a
concern, too.
Privacy impact assessment to do that and make sure that we follow all the civil rights and civil liberties that are associated with that. Congressman, the threat's real. Our adversaries are very adept at hiding their attacks in normal traffic and the normal everyday traffic that comes across the network. Very well could be disguised and it could be malicious. So the only true way to do to protect your networks is to have intrusion detection. It's what everybody has on all their networks now. It's just not consistent in the federal government, and it's not informed by our latest threat information of what we know. And that's what we're talking about. There's a lot of other activities that we need to do to focus on improving cybersecurity beyond just this effort that we're talking about today, and we're working on that, and we'll be happy to brief you that in a detailed session.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. We now yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Ettridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you for being here, and I must confess I joined Ms. Harmon in listening to the testimony this morning. So, Mr. Jamison, given the hundreds of cyber incidents that have taken place over the last few years, how would you rate the department's response to cybersecurity, A through F?
It's been a while since I've been in school. I think
Well,
currently
you can try
we're
any
solid.
number you want to. I'll be
we're-
happy.
I think we're solid C, and if you allow me to expound on that from the standpoint of, as I mentioned before, our current capability from a U.S. search standpoint, and I'm strictly talking about.
Let me just say something. If you say a solid C, you know, I was a state superintendent of schools for a few years. That's sort of average at best.
And that's why we're here, Congress.
And that isn't even close to being good enough in what we're talking about with American people. But I'll let you continue, because I have another question following that.
Congressman, that's why we're here. As I said in my opening statements, we need to do more. Currently, from a DHS and U.S. CERT perspective of having that responsibility across the federal domain, we need to have more comprehensive.
All right, given that then, can you tell this committee what accountability has been put in place, because there are well-recorded numbers of breaches in the government systems? What accountability do we have in place when that happens? If it happens on my watch, what accountabilities am I accountable for?
I'll defer to Karen to talk about the FISMA accountabilities and some of the requirements that each CIO has.
Sorry, excuse me, I'm sorry, sir. We hold the agencies accountable through a quarterly process. We manage this through the President's management agenda on the scorecard. However, when incidents occur, agencies are held accountable. We do work with them to ensure, because first and foremost is when it does occur, that there is a proper response, because it is involving the citizens' data, and first and foremost we have to make sure that the way that we handle that response is addressing their immediate needs, and that we take the proper precautions in place to ensure that the citizen then knows that we are addressing that. Yes, sir.
Let me follow up that, because I think that leads to a little broader question in that area, because every year OMB says that agencies are implementing more security controls on their computers. Yet, every year, the number of successful penetrations into the federal networks rise. This means that every year we lose more and more information to our adversaries. That being true, OMB measures success by the percentage of certified and accredited computer systems. But even the stamp of approval that you're just talking about, sensitive data tends to seep out, okay? That being true, are we using the right metrics? And the second part of that question is, shouldn't we be measuring our ability to stop attacks, or at a minimum, use our ability to detect and respond to attacks as the correct metric? Wouldn't that seem to be a better metric to use in terms of where we are than just measuring the other pieces? I mean, that just seems common sense to me.
Okay, I would agree with you that initially when we first started this process, when FISMA predecessor was the Government Information Security Act, and many of the members have brought this up, initially agencies didn't know what they didn't know. So metrics evolve, and these are the first sets of metrics that we use so that agencies could make sure that they knew what their inventory was. Because if you don't know what you own, then you can't manage it appropriately and know the risk associated with it. So the first set of metrics and the things that we have measured may be, need to improve, and we've talked to Congress about this and GAO, because we are now, and I would agree with you that the metrics that we look at are more output-oriented right now. And we are moving now to a level of more performance, such as the types of metrics that you're talking about, because they...
It seems to me that's how you measure it.
Absolutely, and you know what the baseline is now. We know what these systems are, we know how the agencies are categorizing the systems, and there's consistency across the board.
My time's running out. Let me touch one more point if I may
Yes.
get it in, because I think this is critical. Because it seems to me there's flaws on the on-the-job training. I mean, we've already heard that. If we aren't giving proper training and ongoing training, management practices within federal agencies where workforce do not understand the effects of their actions on national security. I mean, what are we doing to train employees? That's the other side of it. You know, we got to measure both pieces, and that metric seems to me has to change if we're going to get. Because if we do the same thing we've always done, we're going to get the same results we've always gotten.
May I answer?
Please.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we pick certification and accreditation because it's a soup to nuts process. If an agency approaches the process for compliance, check the box because I have to tell OMB and then it goes to Congress, we aren't going to get the result that we intend. But if you look at the process associated with that, all the issues that you brought up, when you certify and accredit a system, you have to know what it is, you have to analyze the risk, you have to put together rules of behavior so that each user, as they sign on, know what they're supposed to do and the consequences associated with not doing that. The last part of that also is residual risk, because the manager in charge needs to say, that service is important, I will live with this risk, here is the compensating control, and hold me accountable. And that is really how the process is supposed to work, and that's where we have to now move it to the next level so that we're actually achieving the result versus a paperwork exercise where we just get a bunch of paper and people are producing stuff and people don't really know what their responsibilities and what they should be held accountable for.
We're doing a lot of work,
And we're improving it.
but the results are meager for the investment, and we've got to do better to protect the American people. I really believe that. Thank you, and thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and the ranking member for holding this hearing. And because I know that time is of the essence, I will move as quickly as possible. I have a few questions, and thank you, witnesses, for appearing today. Is it true, Mr. Is it Charbo? Am I pronouncing it correctly? Mr. Charbo, that you were the CIO of Homeland Security at a time when some intelligence reports about hacking were known to other agencies but not reported to you? Is this true?
Well, sir, I'm not sure what was reported to other agencies.
Okay.
My assumption is that's probably correct.
Okay. At a 2007 hearing, according to the intelligence that I have, the Department of Homeland Security CIO Scott Charbrough, that would be you, told the committee that he had never received any intelligence reports about nation-state hacking and that he was unfamiliar with the activity.
The response, I believe, is that we had had one.
Okay.
I had had one previous to that hearing, which was sponsored through the CIO Council.
Yes, sir.
And at that time, there was nothing that pointed back to DHS.
And you were not familiar with it, and there were others who knew, but you did not know. Is this true?
Not by the name, I believe, that was being discussed at the hearing. I mean, obviously, we'd heard about nation-state hacking and different nations, but I had never had a briefing that pointed back to the department. They were all basically in general at a lower classification level.
Well, did it happen? Maybe I should start there. Did this happen? Was there actually a hacking that took place?
At the department?
Yes, sir.
We have lots of security events at the department. Whether or not those are nation states,
Okay. Was there
we're
a nation
looking at a few, and those
state?
are in a
Let's talk about nation states. Was there a nation state hacking?
There are. Yeah, there are a few that we are looking at, and we'd have to address that on a classified level.
Okay. Is it your opinion that we have not had any cross-agency intelligence failures?
I certainly think it can be improved, and I think that's what this effort is about.
All right. Well, let me go to my next question. Is it true that we had a contractor charged with securing networks at the department, and this contractor did not install intrusion detection systems?
Those are gaps that we identified and that we
that a
had them
true
put in
statement?
place. That is a true statement.
Okay. The question becomes then, what are the consequences when we have these kinds of occurrences? Have we ever had a contractor terminated for failure to perform to the level that this contractor failed to perform? Terminated, we're not talking about renewing a contract, but have we ever had one terminated?
Well, I can only speak to this incident. I mean, from a broader contracting perspective, that would have to go to our contracts.
Do you know?
We did recompete
Let
this
me ask you
contract.
about what you know. Do you know of any contractor ever having been terminated?
I can't speak to anything specific.
So you don't know of one?
To my knowledge, I don't know of that.
Okay. And do you know of anyone who's ever been fired for failure to properly provide intelligence across agencies that should have been provided?
I couldn't put a name on it, but certainly we've had contractors removed.
Well, now I'm talking about a person being fired as opposed to a contractor. We went through the contracting, and you indicated that you didn't know about the contractors.
The question is?
The question is, have we had anybody fired? Has anybody ever been fired?
To my knowledge, I have never fired a federal employee. We certainly have responded to performance, but I have not fired a federal employee.
Do you know of anyone that's ever been fired for failure to perform in this area of sensitive security information transmission?
I can't speak to anything specifically.
Okay.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
In the interest of making sure we get the record straight, Mr. Sharbo, that incident that was referred to by Mr. Green, I think it was the committee staff that brought it to your attention of your shop that there had been some problems with a contractor that you all were not aware of. And I think after that was brought to your attention, you all moved forward and looked at it. Please.
The incident was, the one incident that I believe is being referred to was aware of our staff. What was incomplete was the closure of that because of the different opinions. I mean, much of this hearing is about the level of data that you receive on a particular event. One analyst can look at a piece of data and have one interpretation. Several others can look at it and have different interpretations. A lot of that's dependent on the situational awareness that an individual has. In this case, that's what was presented to me. That coincided with the hearing. We asked for that information. At that time, I turned that over to our security group and said, I have conflicting information here. It's something for you to look at. And I believe that's currently still under investigation, sir.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have 3 votes on the floor, and we've concluded all our witnesses and our questions for the witnesses. I'd like to thank them for their valuable testimony. The members of the committee may have additional questions for the witnesses, and will ask that you will respond expeditiously in writing to those questions. Hearing no further business, the committee stands adjourned.